There's a certain power that faith has, that trusting in Hashem has. And this power is not just beyond the laws of nature, but it also is beyond the laws of the heavenly court also. I'll share with you a few powerful stories that highlight this, the power of trusting in Hashem, trusting in a tzaddik. We had with us last week Rabbi Emmanuel Altais from Melbourne, Australia, and he shared with us a few interesting things about his father, the famous chassid, Rabbi Shmuel Bezalel Altais. Rabbi Shmuel Bezalel, at one point, was living in a very remote area where there were no Jews, certainly no religious Jews, and he befriended someone there who needed a blessing for children. He wasn't religious at all. Not just not religious, but he didn't really know too much about Jews and Judaism. It was very, very, it's all very foreign to him. And Rabbi Shmuel Bezalel told him the power of tzedakah, the power of giving charity. The Talmud says that charity saves from death. And the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that if charity saves from death, then how much more so does charity bring all kinds of blessings. And that's why the Alter Rebbe says it's important to give tzedakah as fast as you can, because you want to bring the blessings down as fast as you can. So this guy heard this very deeply, and he decided to give tzedakah, and he gave a very large donation to the yeshiva in Melbourne. And a year passes, and he and his wife were married already for 20 years, and they didn't have children, and the year passed without children, and he was very upset. And he told Rabbi Altais how upset he was. Here they had this deal. He had given the donation. He gave him a lot of money. It was a lot of money for him, and and he was expecting the blessing to be fulfilled. And Rabbi Altais didn't know what to do. This guy, he was accusing him of being a thief. So he wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe responded that it's very important when you give someone a blessing to be clear that it's just giving a blessing. The Rebbe said there are tzaddikim, there are Rebbes that when they say something, they could promise, but a regular person cannot promise. However, the Rebbe said, since you've already promised, you already made this arrangement. So I don't know the words the Rebbe used, but they basically said, we'll cover this one for you. And sure enough, Baruch Hashem, a year later, this man and his wife were blessed with a child, 21 years after their marriage. So the Rabbi Shmuel Bezalel was a very gifted composer of songs and music, and he made it, and all the chassidim were riling him up, saying, "Oh, you make yourself into a rebbe." So I forgot the name of the area in Melbourne that he was in, but they called him the rebbe from this area, the Melbourne rebbe or something. And there's actually a song that he composed, and the song is called the song of the whatever the area it was, rebbe, as a joke. But it really highlights the power of emunah and faith, even when it seems that this was not ordained either in heaven. It wasn't according to the rules, but nevertheless, this guy, he gave tzedakah and he meant it, and he trusted, and he opened the door. There's a similar story of the Rebbe Marash, which I think I've shared before. There was the time of the Rebbe Marash, when Chassidim would have a farbrengen, it wasn't just a few hours. They had a farbrengen, it was for a few days. And there was one chassid, the Rebbe Marash, who whenever they had a farbrengen, the farbrengens were in his home. And everyone was in his home, and they were eating and drinking and celebrating, and he wasn't home. And he and his wife were not blessed with children. And the chassidim ran out of food, and they go up the stairs in the basement of the home to knock on the door to ask their hostess if she could possibly provide more food for their farbrengen. And she said, I can, but on condition that you all bless me with a child. And the chassidim were a little bit taken aback. Who are they to give a blessing? They're just regular people. But this was serious business. She was saying no blessing, no food. So Mendel Futafaz shared the story, and he said they all stood up, and they dusted off their kapot, their surtuks, and they straightened out their hats. They stood up, and they all gave her a blessing for a child. And the blessing was fulfilled. And this was, her husband was very prominent chassid of the Remarash, and he was aghast. He was aghast because here he had asked the Rebbe for a blessing, and the Rebbe didn't give him a blessing, and these chassidim gave him a blessing, and what does that mean? He just was like, what does that mean? So he went back to the Rebbe Marash, and he asked Rebbe Marash what this means. The Rebbe Marash said like this: on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's ordained for a person what they're going to receive on high, and a person only deserves whatever they deserve. And if a person doesn't have a lot of merit, so then they can't get a blessing for all three areas of life, of children and health and a livelihood. And a tzaddik could possibly, with his intervention on high, he could direct the kindness of Hashem that was apportioned to this person to be for whatever it is that the person needs, the person wants especially. And so he could direct it, and if it's not enough for everything, at least he could direct it to what is more important. So the Rebbe Marash said that in heaven there wasn't enough merit for you to have both be healthy and to have children and to have your wealth, and therefore I didn't want to give you that blessing and take away. So, but the chassidim don't know anything going on in heaven, and they bless you with a child. And the guy is like, so does that mean that I'm going to die now? The chassidim gave this blessing, and they redirected the kindness, and now there wasn't enough. And so if I'm getting a blessing for a child, then what's going to happen to me? So Rabbi Moshe responded, the chassidim don't know, and therefore it doesn't matter. They give a blessing with love. They give a blessing with feeling, and therefore, even though they went against the rules, so to speak, nevertheless, the blessing is going to be fulfilled and it won't take away anything. On that note, similar idea. There's a tzaddik. I don't want to mispronounce his name. I think his name was the Valednik tzaddik, who lived in the time of the Tzemach Tzedek. And the Rebbe said the story of the Valednik when he taught a song every year on Simchas Torah for 10 years. The Rebbe taught 10 songs. And when the Rebbe taught the song of Asad L'Sudasa, the song that we sing on Shabbos afternoon, which parenthetically the Rebbe said that he is happy that he achieved. The Chassidim sing this song because the Rebbe taught this song, and they should say the words, they should sing this song. Because before the Rebbe taught this tune, people weren't so careful to sing the song. And when the Rebbe taught this song, he shared a story about the tzaddik, the Valednik. The story was that there was a couple, and they didn't have any children, and they asked the tzaddik for a blessing. By the way, this tzaddik had a deep respect for the Tzemach Tzedek, and there's a letter that was printed of the Valednik, who writes to this couple, asked him for a blessing for children, and he himself did many, many miracles. He said, for this one, you have to ask Tzemach Tzedek. Anyways, so on one occasion, someone asked the Valednik for a bracha for children, and he responded that you should hang silk in your bedroom. You should hang up silk in your bedroom. Why should you hang up silk in your bedroom? Because in Asailu Sudas, in that Kabbalistic song, there's a line. The line is, Ve'ile milaya yohen l'kayaya The way it's usually translated is, and these words that we are saying, they should become skies, whatever that means according to Kabbalah. And who should rest there in these skies? The sun. The sun in Kabbalah is represents the divine presence. The words that we're saying should become skies, and who should rest in the skies? The sun. So the word milaya, which means words, can also mean silk. So put up the silk up on the ceiling. Instead of putting these words shall become heavens, he said this silk should be on the ceiling. So he hung the silk from the ceiling, and then the end of the song, of that phrase of the song is, and who will rest there? The sun. So just like in English, the sun can be spelled with a U or with an O, so too in Yiddish, the word zun. The zun means a son, a child, and also zun means the sun. So the tzaddik said, by you hanging this silk in your home, that will bring you to have a merit that you'll have the son, you'll have a child. So again, you see this idea of how the exact formula isn't a science. The tzaddik gives a blessing, and it doesn't have to go according to an order that we understand, that's limited to our mind and our ideas. Here he's taking an Aramaic word, and he's translating the Aramaic word into another word that means the same in Yiddish. This is the truth. This is the Torah, and this is something that our minds don't necessarily connect to, but that's the reality. It's like Purim. We're just coming from Purim. Purim is a holiday we're supposed to celebrate ad l'yodeh, to go beyond logic and beyond reason, and connect to something deeper and higher. So on that note, I want to share with you another story. This story was printed in the Sichas HaShavua, and stories like this. The title of the story is, I thank you for my wound. This Rabbi Menachem Kutner, he is the Rebbe's emissary to help terror victims in Israel. And he said the following story. He said that because of, unfortunately, the many wounded, they had to establish in the hospital of Hadassah in Har Tzofim, they had to open up another wing because they couldn't handle the amount of wounded. And so Rabbi Kutner, when he heard about the new since he's taking care of terror victims, when he heard about this, so he went to go visit the soldiers that were staying there. He's going from room to room, and in one of the rooms he meets a soldier named Oz Yaakov. And next to Oz are his parents, Tsuriel and Ronit. He starts talking to them. Oz lives in Jerusalem. He's married. He's a father. And he got hit in his mission in Gaza from shrapnel that went into his head. So Oz says to Rabbi Kutner, he says, I am so thankful to Hashem, I so appreciate that I got this wound. Why? Because thanks to this wound, they did an x-ray, and they discovered that he has in his head a dangerous growth. And so they immediately brought him into surgery, and they took out the growth, and now he's recuperating. The doctor said that because they discovered the growth so early, that's why his life was saved. Had he not been wounded in Gaza, Oz said to Rabbi Kutner, it could be they would discover the growth too late. So as they're saying the story, as Oz is saying the story to Rabbi Kutner, his parents are there, and his parents tell Rabbi Kutner, actually Oz is a product who was born because of a blessing of the Rebbe. So Tsuriel and Ronit told Rabbi Kutner the following thing. They live in Kiryat Arba in Israel, and they were married for 7 years without children. And so Tsuriel said they got the best doctor in Hadassah in Ein Kerem to take care of them, but didn't help. and so he decided to ask the Rebbe for a blessing. He got the number for the secretariat of the Rebbe, but the number was always busy. So for a whole night, he's trying again and again to reach and to connect, but after many, many hours, he finally got the Rebbe's secretary. He told the secretary all the things he's doing, and he asks the Rebbe's blessing. So the secretary took their names and their mother's names, and he promised them that he'll give this to the Rebbe. They continued doing treatments. At one point, the doctor that was treating them said they should go to another doctor, and there's a new kind of treatment that maybe could help them. So the problem was that their insurance wouldn't cover this new treatment, and it was very, very expensive, and they couldn't afford it. So Ronit says, I told my parents what happened, and she said, my father, whose name was Asher Lituv Sharabi, he was the rabbi of the village Evan Shmuel. He said, I agree, I accept to pay for this treatment on condition that the Rebbe will give his blessing for the treatment. Okay? So she was surprised that her father made this condition, but that was his condition. So Tzuriel said, okay, so I called up my friend who was a Chabadnik, and I told him to help me connect with the Rebbe, and he took the details, and he wrote them down, he faxed them to the Rebbe's secretariat. A half hour later, which was very unusual, immediately a half hour later, they get a response from the Rebbe. The Rebbe responded in 3 parts. First of all, the Rebbe said that he supports the new treatment, that this is a good idea. Number 2, he says that he's going to mention them in prayer by the gravesite of his father-in-law. And number 3, he gives them a blessing. So they did the treatment, and it was successful. And in 1990, in Tav Shanun, they were blessed with their oldest daughter. They called her Nesia, like the word for miracle. And they wrote a letter to the Rebbe, telling the Rebbe the good news that they had a daughter. So Ronit said that she heard that whenever a child was born, the Rebbe would send a letter to congratulate and bless the child. And she expected that she would get a letter from the Rebbe as well for her daughter. But weeks and months go by, and she does not get a letter from the Rebbe. So Tzuriel said that when my daughter grew, it came out that they discovered that there was some problem in her foot. And they tried to treat it in various ways. And the doctors eventually said there's no choice, they have to operate. So on the day of their operation, they're full of anxiety and they're full of worry. All of a sudden they see they have a letter from America. The letter was from the Rebbe. He opens the envelope and he sees the Rebbe is giving them a blessing for having a daughter. So the Rebbe didn't give them the blessing when their daughter was born, but when does the letter arrive? On the same day that they're operating on their daughter's foot. So this blessing of the Rebbe calmed them down a lot, and Baruch Hashem, their daughter, Baruch Hashem, recovered completely, whole, and she herself is now today a mother of 5 children. So Ronit said 2 years later, in 1992, they had twins, a son and a daughter, and their son they called Oz. Oz is the soldier that is in this story, and their daughter they called Hadar. In the Torah, there's a phrase, Oz v'Hadar, strength and beauty. So our Oz, our strong one, our son, he is the one who's a hero in Gaza, and in the merit of his wound, he Baruch Hashem, he was saved from this growth. They merited, Baruch Hashem, after Oz and Hadar, they merit to have 6 more children. And that's their story, Baruch Hashem. So I'll share with you one more story. I don't want to be cheap on stories, just tell you 4 or 5 stories. Like one more story, Geschmacka story. Not related so much to the theme we're talking about, but just it's more of a story of the power of a Jew and the power of a Jew's faith and fortitude. This story is also printed in Sichat HaShavua, and this story is about a Rabbi Toledano. Rabbi Toledano was a rabbi in, I don't want to mispronounce it, but I probably am, Menkes in Morocco. Anyone can weigh in on the correct pronunciation? Okay. Meknes, thank you. So Rabbi Baruch Toledano, he visited this, he went to visit, as he's a rabbi during World War II, and he was traveling around to visit, these smaller villages that didn't have such a prominent community. He, as a rabbi of the bigger city, Meknes, which was called like the Jerusalem of Morocco, he went to go visit the smaller cities, and he comes to this town, and it's a winter time during World War II, and he sees that the villagers are all dressed in summer clothing. They're all dressed, like shorts and t-shirts, and it's freezing outside, and he can't believe why they're dressed this way. And they're surprised to see him. Why are you here? He said, I came to see how you're doing. And he saw in their faces that they're very gaunt, they're very worried, they're very anxious. And he's like, what's going on with you guys? Why are you like this? And why aren't you dressed properly? And they said, we can't afford to have other clothing. We can't afford it. So Rabbi Forel really felt bad. He's little kids, with their freezing in the cold. So he promised to do whatever he could to help them. Problem was, the only way to solve this was to collect money and to buy them the necessary coats and clothing and everything. But because it was during World War II and the German army was threatening to go into Morocco, so the king of Morocco made a law that no one can make any collections for anything, because they may need money for the war effort. But Rabbi Fol felt so bad for these kids. He decided he's going back to Menkes, okay, and he's going to collect funds for them. So illegally, he goes to Meknes and he starts announcing the shul. We're collecting funds to help these people buy clothing for the winter. And people are very generous. And the problem, though, is after he collects all these funds, where's he going to buy the clothing? Because it was wartime, it was scarce to buy things in the stores. And the only thing he could do was the stores were empty. They didn't have any merchandise. He had to go buy things in the black market. So he trying to buy, wasn't buying clothing, he was trying to buy material. And someone told him about a certain address, go to this address, go buy material. He goes to this address, and when he gets to the address, he discovers that the amount of money he collected is barely enough for half of the money he needs to buy the appropriate material for the clothing he wants to make. And he's thinking, which kids am I going to say you can have clothing, which kids cannot have clothing? It's such a terrible thing. And he leaves the house empty-handed. He's hoping that, Hashem will help him and he'll be able to collect more money and get the right amount of money to buy the material to take care of these kids. But what he didn't realize was that he was spotted. He was spotted going to this house on the black market, and the government informed on him. And that very same day, 2 soldiers come to his home, and they bring him to, they bring him to court. They bring him to the house of the Hebrew word is Moshel, that the story uses. I'm not sure what the Moshel was, the governor, the mayor, I'm not sure. Either way, Reb Rafal Toledano, he sits down with this governor, this mayor. He takes the money that was in this rubber band, he opens up the rubber band, spreads out the money, and I forgot to mention, when he left his home, he said, Gamzulotev, whatever God does is good. And he lays down the money, and he opens it up, and he puts it down in front of the governor. The governor's like, what are you doing? So he tells the governor, please permit me to tell you the situation of the Jews who are living in the Atlas Mountains, this area of Morocco. And he describes to the governor the cold and the frost and the kids, and they have no clothing. And he said, you're right, I did something illegal. I went to go buy stuff in the black market. I collected money illegally, and it's all. I got involved in things which aren't mine, because he says, you're the governor. You're the one who's supposed to take care of all this. You are the governor of the country, so therefore I'm giving you the money, and you should buy the clothing for these villagers. The governor turned a little red, a little confused. He says, You don't need to give me the money. I'm not interested in taking away this important mitzvah from you. Finish the mitzvah you started. Rabbi Fall responded. His response shocked the governor. He says, I can't finish it. We did collect from the Jewish people enough money to buy this material on a regular time in a regular market. But the prices now have been inflated so much that I can't afford it. What am I supposed to do? I can't decide. This kid's going to get a sweater. This kid's not going to get a sweater. So because he spoke with his heart and warmth, so it touched the Talmud says, Rabbi Tam writes, words that come from the heart enter the heart. And so the governor was very touched, and he wiped a tear and he said, I'll take care of whatever is needed. And I'm going to give out an instruction to give you the difference between the amount of money you have and the amount that's needed to buy the clothing. And he called his attendant to bring him the amount of money that's needed. And then he told his attendant, go call now the manufacturers and tell them they have to sell to Rav Toledano whatever he needs for these Jews living in the Atlas Mountains. So this is the story of how Rabbi Fol Toledano helped these Jews, and it really highlights the power of fortitude, of integrity. Like he was caught red-handed doing something illegal, but he knew the value of his mission. He knew who had sent him. He was going in the mission of Hashem, and therefore he wasn't affected. He wasn't afraid of being arrested. He wasn't afraid of what might happen to him. And his words actually transformed the governor. The governor himself went to help him. It's like the story of Purim that we're coming from now. That the story of Purim is all about v'napechu. That everything's transformed for good. So Hashem should help that we should see v'napechu. There should be a transformation of all the negative things that are going on right now. They all should be transformed for good. And it was just said in Havdalah, the Jewish people had light and joy and gladness and honor. We should see this happening. The coming of Mashiach Tzekenu b'karev mamish. Agutavach, Freil Chavach Menachem, Agutavach Chol David, Agutavach Shila, Abba, Beryl, and Annie, and Ben Chayil, and Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yisrael, and David. Agutavach Freil Chavach.